This is absolutely the most important race in Miami-Dade County, probably in the last 50 or 60 years. It's going to set not only the foundation, but the forward trajectory of public safety for your family, for your parents, for your grandparents, and for your children. And so I think it's really, really important that you not listen to the noise that's going on, that you take a second and investigate, go online, look at everyone's name, look at everyone's background, and determine who you think really has the characteristics to lead this department into the future.
Hey guys, I'm here with Mario Knapp. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for the invite.
A very strong candidate for sheriff. I'm happy that you're joining us today. I'm very proud to say that we get to share a room together. Before the podcast started, we were talking a little bit back and forth. I do want to go through your history within law enforcement. I know it's a very strong history within law enforcement. 26 years and 11 months.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
I usually say 27.
I know.
And I'm like, who's going to hit me for 30 days? Who's going to hit me for 30 days?
But I saw you be precise before, so
yeah.
I want to bring it up. You want to kind of walk us through that career in law enforcement?
Yeah, so I've held every civil service rank in the department. I usually say, to keep it short, I can go into more detail, but I'll just keep it the short way that I generally describe it. But I was an officer, uniform patrol. I was in the SWAT team for some time. I was an instructor in the SWAT team. I became a sergeant, and I had some uniform sergeant responsibilities. Then I went to the tactical narcotics team. I got promoted out of there. Well, I went to training. I don't want to give it all because it's just too long.
It's a lot.
Then, so I'll just shorten it up. I was the lieutenant of the Robbery Intervention Detail, RID.
RID.
It's the department's most high-profile violent crime initiative in Dade County. I was the commander there for 5 years on the afternoon shift. Then I went to become a captain. I was a captain in the Northside District. I was a captain in Kendall. I was a captain in our training bureau. I was a captain in the Warrants Bureau. And then I acted as the chief of communication for Miami-Dade for the entire department, where I reported directly to the director. And then after that, I was a major of the Special Patrol Bureau. And there, to give you a little context, a major in Miami-Dade is like saying a police chief for one of the other cities, right? Geographically and by span of control. But where Special Patrol Bureau is a little unique is most majors have a single captain working for them. I had 3 captains working for me because we provided police service to every corner of Dade County, from the Broward County line down to Monroe. And that was the SWAT team, the bomb squad, the aviation unit, so it's all the helicopters, all the airplanes, the Marine Patrol unit, so all the boats, all the jet skis, the divers unit, the K-9 unit, the motors unit, the incident management team, which is why I was the Surfside building collapse operations commander for that operation.
That was your last operation, right?
That was like my last hoorah, yeah. And then, but within Special Patrol also is the Special Events section, which manages all major special events in the county. So, like the smallest major event you can consider the Dade County Youth Fair. Okay. But the other major events are like the Super Bowl, all the Dolphin games, all the Marlin games, all of that security and police service that we did there. But I also served as the subject matter expert for all matters related to use of force or any application of force by police officers.
And to piggyback off of that point, at a very early stage in your career, you were writing policy for that, right?
Yeah, which is unique because, so for example, as a sergeant in a police department will not generally write policy for any more than the squad he supervises. So if you supervise 6 or 7 people, usually your policies are submit your overtime this way, submit your day off requests, through this process. But it was unique because I was writing policy in the most litigious area of law enforcement, globally for the entire department, and that means from the director all the way down. Anybody who's sworn has to follow those policies, and it's not a matter of just writing it. It teaches you to grow up really quickly and to become an adult and actually mature very quickly because you're writing policy in not only the most litigious area, but you're also writing the training and making sure that the training satisfies all the requirements of the policy, but you're also defending those positions or testifying against officers if they go against the policy that you wrote. And it's a really tasking job, and the reason why is because you have to balance 3 responsibilities, and that is the interest of the department, the interest of the individual officer, and balance that against the interest of the community and keeping the credibility. And so when you're a subject matter expert, you have to keep your credibility, because if you lose it once, you never recover that. So it's a hard balance to maintain, but I did that for a long time.
You know, what I'm hearing as you're saying all these things, you had all these positions of leadership, even early in your career.
Yes.
In your experience, what defines a good leader?
Well, I think identifying that you are not the smartest person in the room. And if you are, and you haven't surrounded yourself around people that are smarter than you, you've done it wrong. So I think the balance of a leader, or the considerations that a leader has to make, is how do you complement your vision without it going against what it is you want to do. I mean, competent people are generally strong-minded people. They're going to have opinions. And I've always felt that you got to be able to get people around you that are willing to tell you when you're wrong. But you as a leader have to know how to harness that, right? And how to respond to that, because the reality is there's no way that I'm going to be the smartest guy in the room every single time. There are times that there are times, but a lot of the time that's not the case. And
I'm sorry for interrupting, but there's a challenge in cultivating an environment, right? And cultivating a culture in which people can challenge you, right?
Right.
Because not only do you have to be a strong leader and make definitive choices and be a calm in a storm,
right,
but you also have to give people the feeling that they're free to communicate, like, wait a second, think about this, like, you may be wrong on this.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge, right?
And also you have to give people the latitude to know that they're free to make a mistake.
Correct.
Because if you set up an environment or an ecosystem where people feel like they can't make a mistake, then they're not going to perform. They're just going to say, I had a sergeant that said something, and it was really smart. She said, yeah, what do you want on your pizza? And that was her way of saying, you're not letting me think. You're not letting me do anything. Just tell me what you want on your pizza, and I'll just put it on. You know what I mean? And that's not the way to lead someone, definitely. But people have to feel free to make a mistake, but they have to feel comfortable in telling you when you're wrong. And I always tell people, you owe it to me to tell me what your opinion is. You owe it to me as if I'm your boss. You owe it to me to tell me that I'm barking up the wrong tree. Because if you know that I am, and you let me do it without you telling me, then you're not looking out for the mission. You're not looking out for you're not looking out for me, definitely. So I need you to have the comfort to be able to tell me when I'm wrong. Find the most argumentative people you know and put them in the room.
So if I'm hearing correctly, a big part of a leader is knowing the right people to put around you.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
And also empowering them and giving them the ability to do what they do best, right? To tell you, hey, let's consider these things, and to be your advisors, especially in turbulent times.
Right.
What other qualities do you think define leaders?
I think you have to provide a vision to your staff. They have to know where they're going. I can tell you in our department, when I became a major, what if I told you I didn't hear from our director? You would imagine that we would meet at least bi-weekly, at least once a month. And I can tell you that it was a really, really, really long time since the day I got promoted to the day that I left, that there was not a single voicemail, not a single. It wasn't even a meeting of, this is what's going on in this office. You're about to take this. This is what I want. This is what I need. These are the challenges that office presents, and this is the vision that I want to go to. We never got that. And I think that good leaders will give you a mission, but then it needs to be principle-based. This is what we want. This is our goal. Now, these are the principles that we're going to follow. And that's what I keep saying about this police department and the sheriff's office and what we need to do. We need to make it a principle-based police department, not a scenario-based police department.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because I believe that, especially within law enforcement, a lot of people are in it because of their passion, right?
Right.
And because of that passion, they want to be successful.
Right.
Right. What does success mean, though?
Right.
Because you do have overachievers sometimes, and it's like, this is what the bar of success is. People will go above it.
Right.
But if there's no clear vision or identity of what success means, it's very difficult to say, hey, we're going to reach this bar, right?
Right. Yeah, it's like working, look, for example, there's the tactical narcotics team. That unit is, first of all, it's necessary, and I've already committed that we're going to bring that unit back within 3 weeks of me being there. And 3 weeks only because the first week is to build the team, and the second 2 weeks are for it to wait. When the transfer comes out, we have to wait by policy for 2 weeks for them to, for the shift change and everything else. But the tactical narcotics team, the whole goal behind the tactical narcotics team was to get drugs off the street. But in doing so, you're arresting the criminal, you're cultivating criminal informants to get to the bigger fish, but you're also taking guns off the street, right? And so what we generally do is we'll watch a drug hole, we'll watch them sell, we'll arrest the buyer and obviously solidify the fact that he bought drugs from there. Then we'll arrest another buyer. And we'll get 2 or 3 just to establish the case against the seller. And then we go directly in to get the seller. Well, for many years, it became a stat-oriented thing. And so I think we kind of lost the focus and we said, no, let's sit here. We're getting 1 buyer every 10 minutes. That's a lot of arrests per night. We were looking at the arrest. We weren't looking at the outcome. We weren't principle-based.
I understand what you're saying. So it's like, on stats, this looks great.
It looks
However,
great, but we were abandoning the mission, which was let's finish that one, let's build the case on the dealer, and let's do the same thing and actually plant seeds in different areas of the county. So that's what I mean by it needs to be principle-based. And I've always said that this is your goal. Your goal is to take guns off the street, take drugs off the street, and put criminals behind bars. But the calculus needs to be, was it fair? Was it respectful? And when it makes the media, is it going to generate public trust? And that's what I mean by it needs to be principle-based, and that's how we're going to establish this police department on those principles.
That's very interesting. And I can see how you're already showing a vision for it, right?
Right.
And with that vision, then from there on, you can give a game plan to your...
Yeah, and it has to, because remember that the way this position will be is everybody in the department is really going to be representing a sheriff's office. But the sheriff's office, when they say there's a new sheriff in town, I hate to use it, it's very cliche, but it means something, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to be, that sheriff has to take full responsibility of every single thing that happens. And what I've said before is, because people have asked me, well, what do you think about this office? It's going to be the 3rd most powerful position in the state. By the way, I don't agree with that, but that's what they say. And I'm like, I never look to the sides. I kind of look down, right? And when I say down, I look at my operation and how we can improve it. I'm not looking for power. I'm not looking for authority. I'm looking for responsibility. I expect the community of Miami-Dade to hold me accountable and hold me responsible for everything we do and everything we don't do. That being the case, I have to set a clear vision for the command staff, for the management, for the first line supervisors, and for the troops. And they have to hear that directly from me for them to know which way we're going.
It's interesting you say that, because within my study of leadership and how to become a better leader, right, accountability is a strong thing. Right? And that's another metric to success, right?
Right.
Everybody taking accountability for their own actions.
Right. There are leaders that will tell you, in fact, I won't get into that, but there are people that say they're leaders and they'll walk into a room and say, hey, we messed this up. Who's going to take this one? And they'll assign someone. Somebody who's blindly loyal will say, I'll take responsibility for this one. And they'll go and they'll kind of let the person save face. And that's okay if you're looking at the best interest of the sheriff. But I think that's cannibalistic, right? I think that's a cannibalistic trait. I think you need to look out for the employee first.
And how do you do that? What would be the opposing scenario to that?
Well, if you're the sheriff, you have to take responsibility. You have to stand in front of the camera and you have to say, this is what we did. I made a decision. We've pivoted. We've changed. We learned from this, but this is where we're moving now. But you can't continue to put the burden on your employees to take the heat for a decision you made. You shouldn't do that. And if you do, then that's not leadership. In my opinion, that's not leadership.
I understand that. I want to shift a little bit. We were talking earlier, and I saw some pictures. You've practiced jiu-jitsu, right?
Yes.
And we were just talking. You achieved the brown belt in jiu-jitsu.
I did. I think right now I'm a 3-stripe white belt because that brown belt's got to be expired by now.
You practiced so much with the brown that it turned white, right?
Yeah.
So within that, how many years have you been practicing jiu-jitsu?
So I started jiu-jitsu in 95.
Okay.
But I've been on and off.
I understand.
And I wish I could say that it was, my instructor was Pedro Valente from the Valente brothers. And Pedro would tell me, and Guy, his brother, would say, Mario, even if you can show up only once a week, just don't stop coming. And I wish I had the time, and I wish I had the discipline to have done that, because I would have gotten my black belt for a long time ago. And not that the belt matters, but just that I would be a lot more in tune. Like right now, I feel like jiu-jitsu has evolved under me. You know what I mean? Like under my nose. And every once in a while, I'll go back.
It's a whole different game now, right?
It is a different game. And I know that the traditionalists will say, well, it's still a guard. You still have 2 arms and 2 legs. I'm like, yeah, but they're doing such different stuff.
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
very different.
Yeah, very different. It's evolved. And like I said, I would have to probably spend at least 6 months training again, right, to feel like I'm at a level where I can compete with this new wave of jiu-jitsu.
The Eddie Bravos of the world.
The Eddie Bravos, the Gordon Ryans.
Yeah, the Gordon Ryans.
Danaher has changed the sport totally.
One of the world's best coaches.
Yeah.
Right?
I saw him in person one day, and I didn't want to interrupt him because he was sitting there. He was on the mat. We visited New York.
Oh.
And we went to the Henzo Gracie. Then I ran into Henzo at a restaurant.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
But I ran into him and I said, I don't want to walk up to him because I'm going to look like a fanboy, even though I am.
Can you sign me, please?
Yeah, it wasn't like that. I just wanted to talk to him, But it was cool to see him, and it was cool to. He has no clue. He has no clue that we were like, that's John Danaher.
Yeah, I understand though. I understand. So you talked about discipline, right? And that's something. I mean, I practiced jiu-jitsu for a bit, and that's something that I really got out of it, right? Like composure and discipline.
Yes.
Right. What other skill sets do you believe, if any, that jiu-jitsu has given you to lead?
Right. Well, you used you said the one word that I always say for jiu-jitsu, and that's composure. Composure and patience.
Yes, sir.
I think jiu-jitsu teaches you to be patient while you're not getting hurt. You don't always have to be winning. You just have to avoid losing.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes if you're in the guard, if you're on your back, if the guy's on top of you, but you maintain your composure and you maintain your patience while he's doing all the crazy things he's doing trying to kill you, you can just kind of relax. That's your time to, all right, don't worry. The storm will pass.
And to feel.
Yeah, and then be able to sweep and do whatever you got to do. And I think that a lot of that, translates to life. It definitely translates to police work. It translates to, I think it translates to leadership too.
Yes,
it definitely translates to a campaign.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, if there's anything I've learned, I remember one day I was running a 5K. Right? I wasn't fully trained for it, but I'm like, okay, I'm in good shape. I'm going. It was one of those Miami days. It was like 90 degrees outside. It was very hot, and I'm running, and I'm kind of struggling a little bit. And then all of a sudden, this is after 2-3 years of training. Right. I'm like, but nobody's trying to choke me.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, I'm good, And then at that moment, like I got a second win.
You just reminded me. There was I was in SWAT, and we had a team leader. And so here's like difference the difference between like the culture today and the culture before. So the culture before, for every you can't curse here, so I won't say it. But
you can go for it.
For every asshole sergeant that there is in the department, there's an employee who made him that way. You know what I mean?
That was before.
Yeah. Well, I think that part carries over, right? Because nobody becomes a sergeant and says, I'm going to screw these guys over and goes up the ranks that way.
I understand.
Every sergeant goes, I want to lead these guys. And then you have somebody that does something and does it all the time to the point where you have to, But the reason why I mentioned that is because the best sergeants I ever had were super, super, super strict. And those were the ones that I learned the most from. But we had one that we were in SWAT, and he says, we're going to go on a run tomorrow. And I said, okay, we're going to go over the bridge in Key Biscayne. And I freaking packed all my stuff, and I forgot my sneakers.
No.
All I had was my SWAT boots. And all I had was my SWAT boots. And I knew with him, that there was he didn't care.
Yeah.
And he looked at me. And I know that his heart, it mattered to him, but he knew he had to show me responsibility. And I had to run that thing. I had calluses everywhere. It was, but I had to go through with boots. So, you're talking about 90 mile or 90 degree weather. We had to do that with boots on. It was a disaster. But I go back to there, in leadership, what we have now, I think, in leaders is They want to try to be your friends, and that's more important than actually leading. And if you're going to be an effective leader, you have to be able to balance that. You have to lead, you have to correct them, let them save face when you correct them, but you got to be strict enough to where they realize the importance of what it is that, the mission is.
I was going to say, the ones that you learned from, right, they were strict but fair, right?
Fair.
So you're strict, right? You're disciplined, you do it, but you're fair. And you're also a human, right?
Right.
If there's rules without relationship, it's chaos.
Right.
But you have to have both, right?
Yeah. I had a sergeant who, this one was probably overly strict, but I still learned a lot from him. But it was something that had happened, and I was going to get, I missed court the first time. And I missed court. The second time, I missed court because I lost my court book. But I walked over to him that night, and I said, "Hey, Sarge, can you look in the system? I know I have court tomorrow morning. I don't know what courtroom it is. Can you look?" And he says, "Just go on the road. We'll do it later." And he forgot to call me. And I forgot about it because we're going from call to call. The next night, I show up there at midnight, and I'm like, I worked midnights at the time. I go, "Hey, Sarge, last shift, we didn't get to do it. Can you?" And he says, "Mario, there's calls holding. Go out and get, So I do that. And that next morning was like a Tuesday, or I don't remember exactly, but I had court that day, and I missed it. 2 days in a row that I told him to look in the system, and we both forgot about it. And then that Monday, or that Tuesday morning, or whatever it is, I come in, and he says to me, "Hey, you missed court this morning. And I said, "Yeah, Sarge, don't you remember I asked you for the thing?" And he says, "Well, that's your fault, not me." And he wrote me up. But when I go and we had to sit there with the lieutenant was the one, and he was known as the strictest guy there. And he says to me, he didn't like the fact that it happened the way it did. He didn't like the way the sergeant did it. But the lieutenant says to me, "Hey, listen, I understand what happened. It's a rule." He says, "Don't worry about it. I know what happened here." And he looked over at the sergeant like with a weird face. And he goes, "He knows what happened here." He did one of those. Uh-huh. And then he turned around and goes, "Don't worry, it's going to go away in 2 years. Just leave it alone." And then when I got up, I said, "Thank you, sir." When I got up, he says, "Sarge, stay here. I want to talk to you."
Oh, man.
It was one of those things. But I still learned. But see, that guy was fair. And you got to let people save face.
100%.
If somebody messed up, they're going to know they messed up when you told them they messed up. But you got to give them the opportunity to later on take that risk again and try to complete the project in a way that they see fit. Because if you don't let them do that, then you're just micromanaging, and it never works.
Yeah, and micromanagement never works, right?
No.
Like if you feel the need to this is from the civilian world, right?
Right.
But if you feel the need to micromanage, you hired the wrong people.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's funny you say that because you said the civilian world. I was on the training advisory board for a weapons company for some time, and I feel like I learned more about leadership there than I learned in the police department.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is?
Because in the police department, it's a paramilitary structure. There's ranks and there's this. And in the private sector, when you see guys walk around with jeans and a T-shirt, you don't really know who's who. And by the way they interact and by the way they talk and they get on the board and they're talking about a multi-billion-dollar company that's gone public, and it's a publicly traded company, and the CEO walks in and you see these things. It's a different methodology, I think.
I understand.
Right? And so that's one of the things that I think I've been able to pick up is that it's not all what it really is meaningless. All rank does is it establishes a span of control for the department. And it's significant, but it's not the most important thing. It's the person's attributes, it's the person's characteristics, and more importantly, it's the way the person treats people and makes people feel, and that's what determines how much work you get out of them.
I was taught, to that point, I was taught by a very wise black belt. Mm-hmm. When you step in the mat, you treat everyone as if they're a black belt.
Right.
Right? And it helps to look past the rank.
Right.
It helps to look past the color on their belt. And you really do start to understand that you can learn from everyone, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand why there's ranking within a police department, within a county. I understand those things. Right. But it's important to treat everybody with the same level of respect, right?
Right. Yeah, and it's funny because that's kind of changed in jiu-jitsu too. I mean, look at a purple belt now, and look at what they're accomplishing against black belts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that was never a thing.
That was never a thing back then. Back then, you knew a purple belt is always going to wipe the mat with a white belt,
yep.
And a purple belt is going to beat the blue belt. But that's not the case anymore.
Not the
I've
case.
seen purple belts beat black belts, and I'm like,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
and it happens all the time. I mean, there's a girl, I forget her name right now, but I've seen her compete. She's just a blue belt under Gordon Ryan. I think Helen Crevas, I forget her name. She's got the big ponytails. I love watching her. Now she just turned 17. She's a blue belt. I saw her compete at the karate combat event, the first one that they had at here in I think it was in Davie. But her confidence and the way she walks around, and she's just a blue belt, and she's destroying people. So it's blue belt.
Yep. Yep. So it's interesting, right? I mean, I feel like we're at a crossroad right now, and social media is kind of to part with that. There's just so many variables in today, and you kind of talked about the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things, and failures of leadership, and the potential for new leadership, and you coming into this sheriff position, the possibility of what it could be when you're that, right?
Right.
I want to talk about, you briefly talked about within the first 3 weeks there was going to be a narcotics team, correct?
Right.
What are other visions that you have for the first 30 days, first 100 days?
Right.
Like, can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So luckily I know this agency from top to bottom. One of the things that I think are a challenge is, or let's just say that I think is a deficiency, is if you grab the table of organization right now of this department, I can't tell who works for who. It used to be when I first started in the agency that we had one director and 3 assistant directors, and then from there it kind of went down. There was a clear chain of command, and there was a clear span of control.
You're saying that's not the case anymore?
No. Now we have a chief of public safety that works for the mayor. We have a director. We have a deputy director. We have 6 assistant directors. Or I'm sorry, well, this was like 3 months ago we had 6. Now we're down to, I think, 5. I don't even know because that's how convoluted it is. And we have a representative from the mayor's office, which we've never had before, embedded into the police department that's actually running every aspect of this police department, from promotions to transfers to everything else.
Really?
Yeah. And so if you look at it, who can you hold responsible for something that happens? Let's look at the COPA event that happened the other day. Who's responsible for that? Is it the commander on scene? Because that would have been under my command. I was the major of special patrol, of special events. That's what we did. Who are you going to blame for that? Because the community of Miami-Dade deserves answers on how that happened.
100%.
7,000 people running around with no tickets, no nothing. You had police officers that were working in there for 7-8 hours, dying of dehydration. I'm not going to say dying because somebody will.
No, I understand.
But suffering from possible dehydration. They're wearing all this stuff. They weren't even offered a single bottle of water by their own command staff. Not a single bottle of water. You had mayhem everywhere. So who are you going to blame? Are you going to blame the commander? Well, who was the commander? Because there was a major, but there was a chief in charge. So do you blame the chief? Well, no, you can't blame the chief because the director showed up. There were assistant directors there. So everything is blurred. Then you had this chief of public safety that was walking around. Now remember, this guy's never been a police officer. He's never handled a scene like that. He's a jailer from Broward, right? And then you have the mayor who I hear was also on scene walking around. So who there are you going to blame?
Yeah, there's no clear chain of command.
There's no clear chain of command.
There's no clear chain of accountability. And
there wasn't.
I understand your perspective on that.
So there was a lot of intelligence deficiencies there because they didn't understand the level of fanaticism for soccer that there is, comparing it to football. 2 totally different things. And so there's so many things that broke down there. But the beauty of, just really quick, going back to a sheriff is, the sheriff is going to be to blame, and that's it. As far as the police department goes. Remember, there was a lot of politics, too, between the COPA people and the Hard Rock Stadium people. There's a lot of things to look at. But the moral of the story is, from the law enforcement or public safety perspective, there should be only one person to blame.
Yes, sir. Yeah, especially a leader that takes accountability and says, "Hey."
Yeah, and who has?
And the thing is, like, that's a good point, right? Like, things like that happen, right? But the question is, where's the pivot, right? Because we are hosting, I think it's 7 FIFA games in Miami in the same stadium,
and there's a World Cup.
That's what I meant to say. The 7 games of the World Cup are going to be in Miami, right? Okay, that happened. right? Something didn't work clearly.
Right.
Who is going to take accountability, and what's the plan for the following thing?
Right.
And I see your point on if there isn't a chain of command, like how do we get to that conclusion?
Right.
Because at that point, people can just point the finger, right?
And that therein lies the problem with the current structure. And again, we go back to the chain of command. There is no person that you can say in that it's not even a pyramid, which is the problem. There's nobody to blame. There's nobody that's going to take full responsibility for it, and there should be. There needs to be somebody. If you want to gain the respect and the credibility by your rank and file, somebody there needs to stand up and say, "This was my responsibility. I overlooked this." You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
then start to pick up the pieces.
And leading from the front, right?
Exactly.
Because if the leader does that, the people under the leader say, wait, I need to do that in the next situation.
Exactly. Right.
And then ultimately everyone takes accountability.
Right.
And we have a better system.
That's the idea.
Yeah, I know you had briefly mentioned a while ago about internal affairs.
Yes.
And how the point of contact is no longer the director, right? That kind of falls into the structure, correct? And how
Yeah, I
things
think
would
the
change?
new director might have put it back under her.
Okay, because I know this was an interview like 11 months ago.
Yes,
so
yes.
Things may have changed.
So look, our previous director, I got a lot of love for him. Him and I used to ride together as sergeants in Narcotics Bureau in TNT, in this neighborhood, in this area, countywide really, but we were here a lot. Somebody convinced him somewhere along the line, and he must have agreed to it, so because it was done, that he should not be aware of everything that's happening in the police department, because if you have access to him and you tell him a problem, he has to acknowledge it and then be responsible for the fixing of it, right? Or ultimately be responsible for answering for that problem. And so somebody convinced him that, look, don't talk to anybody. Let us talk to them, and we will buffer you from that. And I just feel that that's the wrong way to run a police agency. You can't do that. And that's what was being done. Internal affairs has been something that if you look and do your research, you don't have to take my word for it, but look at every other department, and I'm going to guarantee you that in the vast majority, and I'm going to be in upwards of 90% of police agencies, internal affairs reports directly to the director.
The director.
Or to the chief, or whatever, to the sheriff. And why? Because there's a lot of really, really, really sensitive investigations when you're investigating your own people. You can't let that go everywhere. You can't let that bounce anywhere. There's got to be a degree of privacy.
I understand.
Right? And I don't understand why for many, many months, and I'd say maybe even over a year, the Internal Affairs Bureau no longer responded directly to the director, and I think that's catastrophic.
So from an outsider's perspective, I've heard a lot about the sheriff's race, right? This is something that hasn't happened in over 60 years in Miami, right? For those that don't know,
right?
They were saying, I've heard a lot of mixed feelings. Obviously, when things change, there's always going to be all these mixed feelings. But people were saying, this is becoming a political thing. But from what I'm hearing from you, from the current system, the chain of command, it already was a political thing, right?
Well, so first we have to acknowledge that every single office in Miami-Dade County and anywhere in this planet has internal politics.
Yes, of course.
You have politics here.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Of course.
So to say that there's no politics is wrong, especially in the fact that, I spent 27 years in every civil service rank in this department. I dealt with politics every day. So I do have political experience from that perspective.
Of course.
Right? Now, the reason why we're going back to a sheriff's office is to get rid of the political influence.
That's what I meant to say, like the political influence it's already in there, right?
Right. It's already there. And why? Because right now the mayor has the authority, a politician, has the authority to tell the director, go investigate that way and don't investigate this way. Do this over there, but don't do this over here. And if you don't, you're fired.
And with people within a political appointed position that have never been voted on, whereas the sheriff itself is voted on, right? That's
yeah, and that's what I mean. People. Now, I will tell you that sadly, this race is being overly politicized. I mean, just look at this. Look, let's consider a few things. We left the sheriff structure because there was corruption within the sheriff's office. Go figure, Miami, right? That's a surprise to everyone, right? But there was a corrupt sheriff. He goes to grand jury indictments. He goes, they couldn't risk having another election. They bring another guy from the outside who didn't have a brother, sister, uncle, or cousin in this place, and came in and cleaned the house. You know, he cut heads. He moved all the corrupt people. And the department became a beacon, right, of professionalism for the rest of the country. There was NYPD, LAPD, and MDPD, right? Maybe a few more in there, right? But what ends up happening is now in 2018, the public realized and said, wait a minute, there's the mayor controls all of this, whoever the mayor is. Today it happens to be Danielle Levine Cobb. But before that it was someone else, and after her it would have been someone else. They have the authority to tell the director to do this or do that. Now, here's the thing that people are forgetting to tell you, and I know that you know you will very likely probably had people here before and very likely have people here after, right? But there's little things. Remember that during a campaign, every single person is going to mention the characteristics that are, you know, in the light most favorable to them to justify them as the best candidate for this position. So some of them, for example, if you have an attorney, he's going to say you need an attorney to handle this because I read law and this and that. And if you have a politician, the politician will say, well, I understand the political structure and I think that, you know, and all this other stuff. Because we have to, and this is the key thing, we have to go from the transition. We have to transition from a police department to a sheriff's office. But that's just political speak. This is what I call compliance by fear and confusion. And that's what they're trying to do. We have always been a sheriff's office. The constitutional responsibilities of the Miami-Dade Police Department have always been intact as it was a sheriff before. As a matter of fact, I don't have it here, but in my badge, the badge says sheriff's office, and I've had 5 of those because I was an officer, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, major. Every single one since major, since 94, said sheriff's office. And the reason why I tell you that is because the fact that we weren't structured like a sheriff's office and we didn't really use the authority of a sheriff because it was assigned to a politician, and most people don't even know what the role of a sheriff is, we just kept it streamlined like a police department. But the infrastructure exists. And so all that's going to happen when these people tell you that we got to transition and I dealt with attorneys and I've dealt with this is, the 3-year transition only means that here's the government building, and there's going to be 100 cables attached to the Miami-Dade Police Department. And each one of those cables is a contract, is a list of benefits, you know, all associated to an organization that all gets approved through the county government. But when you hear candidates telling you, I am the head of the transition team, and you ask them a question about the transition team and they say, oh no, we got to wait 3 years until the transition is over, they don't even understand what their own responsibility is and what the transition is. All the transition, and the reason why it's 3 years is because the onus is on the county to not turn off the power on the sheriff's office and its structure until they're ready to assume and disconnect each one of those cables.
That makes sense to me.
So you have water, you have power, you have sanitation, assuming that like a house structure. Well, all that means is that they cannot turn off the power for 3 years. But if I find a contract within 3 days or 2 years, 9 months, and 7 days, I can now go to the mayor and say, or the commission and say, oh, by the way, the power contract, we already found a good one, we don't need you. And you cut one of those wires. They have to maintain all those connections for 3 years up until the moment that the sheriff decides that he's going to disconnect.
That makes sense.
So it'll give us 3 years to make all those things. Nobody is going to go in there. It would be really irresponsible for anybody to go in there and cut all of them and cut ties all together. You can't do that.
Of course.
So obviously we're going to build a team of people. We will have attorneys. We will have our own legal counsel. I'm not of the opinion that that an attorney is even relevant in this position. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. We're going to have attorneys anyway. We have attorneys within the department that are on our payroll that we'll use for some of these things as far as legal guidance.
Absolutely. That'd be your advisors, your counsel.
Exactly. You ask attorneys for legal sufficiency. You don't ask attorneys to lead your decision making, right? And I use that only because, not that it matters. I use that only because that's one of the examples. Politicians will do the same thing. So there's a lot of confusion, but you have to ask yourself, why is it that there is so much political interest in this race if we are under the understanding that we're supposed to separate the police department from all political influence? Why do you have congressmen involved giving money and backing to certain candidates? Well, obviously because there's a benefit there. You know what I mean? They're trying to maintain control. Why? Yeah, we can go down a list, but I don't want to point people out. If you have further questions, we'll get into it.
Yeah,
but the moral of the story is just the occurrence of the assassination attempt on the president and even the Copa event, I think should be, we don't have to go any further than those two things, and we're only talking about a week away, that should be indicative of the need for somebody with real, true, boots on the ground, administrative, command, but most importantly, operational experience in this police department.
Absolutely. I had the pleasure of being in a conference this Saturday for the Bleeding Blue Foundation.
Okay, I wasn't able to make it. I wanted to go.
It was an amazing event.
Yeah.
And one of the police officers speaking was one of the officers that was involved in the Breonna Taylor case.
Got it.
And we can go into specifics of the case and not, and we can. But what I grabbed out of it is, there are many occasions in which police are at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yep.
Right. And how someone that's trying to protect our community can get highly involved into politics without even knowing it's going to happen.
Right. Of course.
And I see the sheriff's position as a very interesting one nowadays, because there is the echo chambers of social media. There are, the political guidance on both sides, right? So not only are you protecting our community, but you're also protecting those who protect us.
Right, of course.
And I think accountability is an important part of that,
Exactly.
right? Because, this is not speaking on anyone in particular in that case, but the certain police officer that was speaking, he said that his leadership turned their back on him.
Right.
And that's you start going into a dark place, because he wanted to serve his community, he wanted to protect, and then to say, I'm doing the job of protecting this community, and then just have the leadership turn and be like, nope, he's racist. We'll see you later. Again, I'm not going to get into details. I don't know everything that happened. Only God knows all the exact details behind that. But from his perspective, hearing those things, I will say as a concerned citizen, as someone who loves his community, I would like to see a leader stand up for the people that are protecting us, right? When do so. And again, on the other side of that coin, right, if someone is doing something that's malicious, or someone is doing something to endanger their community, for them also to deal with the full extent of the law as well. I think that's important, right?
Well, I mean, think about, you can't have one without the other. Right. I mean, you talked about accountability. The way you handle issues of accountability are what affect your credibility. You see what I mean? And once you affect your credibility, and you lose your credibility with the community, with your rank and file, with your management, and with the public in general, once you tarnish your credibility, it's very, very difficult to ever get that back, right? Yes, and that's why, I mean, there's certain characteristics that I think that are really, really important in this sheriff's race, and that is that you got to have somebody in here with a huge amount of experience, a huge amount of integrity, but an untarnished amount or an untarnished level of credibility. Because the best indicator of future performance is past performance.
Absolutely.
Do you know there's people in this race, there's people in this race that have not 1, not 7, not 12, but over 30 sustained, meaning they were investigated and found guilty of falsifying police reports to make overtime. And they're in this race. There are people that now are talking about the importance of having conservative Republican values. And they're saying that now because it's a Republican primary. But in the last several elections, they never voted Republican. They actually donated money twice to the Democratic Party. You know what I mean? But it just makes sense because it's political expediency, But these are all things that I continue to tell people. I'm not asking for your vote yet. I'm asking for your skepticism. Be skeptical. I'm not a politician. I'm a street cop that's had every level, that's, had all the most high profile and volatile assignments in the police department. 0 controversies, but look that up. Don't believe me. right? And then based on that, because I'm running for political office, treat me like a politician. Don't believe a word I say. Fact check it. But do that to every other candidate, because the information is out there, but you have to find it. And I just, I find a little bit sad, but a little bit thirsty, like my daughter says, a little bit thirsty how some of the people are just, I'll tell you something that's interesting. It's interesting to hear civilians that know nothing about, it's not that it's insulting. They don't know, they're not in this world, right? They don't understand terminology. They don't know, because they're not in it. I don't expect them to know it. But when they build such strong opinions because they like someone, and then they'll attack someone else, yet they have no concept of what they're talking about. You know what I mean? And it happens, and it's just kind of comical. But it's just to show you it's political tribalism. And we're seeing a lot of it.
And we're seeing a lot of it, absolutely. Yeah. If someone wanted to learn more about you and your campaign, you mentioned that. Well, what's the best place to do it?
So I think the best way to do it is go to the website, marioforsheriff.com. On Instagram, we have Mario for Sheriff. On Facebook, it's Mario Knapp for Sheriff. I do a lot of lives lately because I'm trying to be out there and actually talk about issues all the time. And I try to be. There's a difference between being in attendance and being present. Those are two different things.
Yes, sir.
I try to be present. I try to make myself accessible to everyone. And every time I do a live, I don't ask people to ask certain questions. I open it up, and that's very, that's very. How can I say? It's just open. It's open. Whatever they ask, I'm going to respond to, and it's very transparent. Let's just say. So just follow Instagram. There's a lot of videos there. We have a YouTube page too that we did recently. A couple little shorts in there, but we have a lot of information. We have a clear plan, and I think we've been leading this campaign cycle the entire time. We started in June of 2023. I challenge everyone that's watching, all the viewers, to look at what it is that we've said and then compare that to a lot of the other candidates, because one of the things you'll realize is that there's not an individual thought that any candidate has come up with that we have not been mentioning since June of 2023. And that becomes important. And then the chronology of entering this race also will inform you as to some of the interests that are going on in the race.
I want to say, to your credit, we reached out, and you reached out back immediately.
Right.
We appreciate that. I want to say also one of our coworkers, Gio, reached out to you. He sent a DM to you, and you immediately answered his question.
Right.
And that's a lot of credit to you. I know the amount of work that takes to do. Right. But we appreciate the fact that you're accessible for the questions. We appreciate your time that you've come on this podcast. Like that's something that we need a lot of. Right. We've reached out to a lot of candidates. Right. And you were the first one to respond. There's one more that's scheduled, and we're talking to another one. But to your credit, thank you for being so responsive. Thank you for answering these questions and for being transparent. Aside from that, thank you for the time that you've served your community up to this point. We greatly appreciate all of our law enforcement. We appreciate those that protect us. Right. And thank you for coming today. Thank you so much.
No problem. I appreciate the time, and whenever you want to do it again, I'll be back. I'm always accessible.
Nice. Thank you. Is there any final thoughts you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I just want to tell the public, this is absolutely the most important race in Miami-Dade County, probably in the last 50 or 60 years. It's going to set not only the foundation, but the forward trajectory of public safety for your family, for your parents, for your grandparents, and for your children. And so I think it's really, really important that you not listen to the noise that's going on, that you take a second and investigate, go online, look at everyone's name, look at everyone's background, and determine who you think really has the characteristics to lead this department into the future. And once you do that, I think we'll come to the same conclusion, and that is that we got a lot of experience and a lot of credibility in this field.
Mario Knapp for Sheriff, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.